Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gyan Bhampani, and I'm the host of the Entrepreneurship Insights Podcast. This afternoon, we're here with Ellen, and she's a really prominent member in the STEM community, has conducted some extensive research with AI, and also has her own podcast. So I believe it'll be a wonderful session, a wonderful conversation, talking to her about her ventures, her experiences, and her entrepreneurial journey. Thank you for joining the podcast today, Ellen.
Yeah, awesome. It's a lot of fun to be here. I'm excited to talk with you more.
Yeah, same here. It's definitely a pleasure. So first off, just give us some background. How'd you discover entrepreneurship and your research? Like, how'd you get started with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't think there's a specific, I know a lot of people have entrepreneurship bug stories where, when they're young, they caught the entrepreneurship bug, so they say. For me, it wasn't really a one moment. I was just always interested in solving challenges, kind of more like puzzles. Growing up, I loved escape rooms, all of that type of stuff. Loved just having fun, doing a lot of coding, trying to solve problems that way, or just a lot of different activities that I did that really made me love to try and identify problems, learn how to ask questions, and then figure out how to actually solve them. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got that initial spirit of wanting to, in general, just try and do things that are hard and pressing and challenging, and not being afraid of trying to ask those types of questions. And then from there, I've been pretty involved in overall trying to solve problems in medicine with my research, as you mentioned, and also with education. I think one of the best ways that I find personally to learn, I'm a big believer in the Feynman technique, which if you don't know who Richard Feynman is, phenomenal physicist, and his theory is that if you can't explain anything in a very simple manner to other people, then you really don't understand it enough. And there's one very famous lecture where he was going to explain a very difficult concept, and he just came back and he said, I can't explain it to a 5-year-old. It's because we don't know enough about this field. And so, yeah, that's why I really also I have my own nonprofit, Zipline Theory, which we're pretty much teaching people how to solve pressing problems in fields that aren't taught in schools. So yeah, I think just in general, culturing that mindset of entrepreneurship and creating, just like you've done with your podcast, it's very a fun way to try and do something outside of your own realm.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely believe in just if you have that sort of mindset, I guess that's the thing that you can always fall back on when things aren't going the way that you want them to. And so what do you enjoy most about you talked about your nonprofit, what do you enjoy most about handling that and running that?
Yeah, so I think the main thing about starting your own venture is just meeting people you otherwise would have been unable to meet before. So I know I've gotten to meet a lot of different Harvard professors, university people who are really at the top of their fields, and trying to learn from them and share that knowledge with other people, kind of open source knowledge. And so yeah, that's been a huge part of it. And also just in general, doing hosting events, doing things that you could never have imagined that you as a high schooler could do. So I remember one of our events, we actually were able to work with the Department of Defense and some really leading organizations, and really try to be at the forefront of change. And I think especially when you're young, being able to work with people a lot older than you, a lot more experienced, it's just a way to get yourself immersed in an environment where you can grow much, much faster than if you were, just relying on traditional methods of learning.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just especially based on what your nonprofit does, right? It teaches people how to just solve real solutions with their web or with their development experience, and so that's really interesting. So you have a lot of passions, interests, fencing. You do fencing. You have your own podcast, and also you do you organize the UPenn Climate Ventures organization. So could you just give us a bit of background? What do you do? What do you enjoy most? What really keeps you doing that?
Yeah, so the answer is going to probably sound a lot less motivational. But in essence, like I think a lot of times it's like I do things just because they're fun, right? And I found that when you just kind of I have this philosophy I've been developing, which is like just in general trying to treat life more like a game. And I know a lot of times it's easy to frame it like a competition. Like you're always trying to like optimize for like results, external factors, like a lot of like noise versus actual signal. And I remember there's one time I talked to someone on my podcast too, and they said a quote that I really like, which was, if you actually want to help people, if you want to help people, you have to actually help people. And so in general, just like to me, I've just been all about like trying to have fun in everything I do, whether it's like through entrepreneurship, whether it's through research, or just like personal hobbies in general. Like for example, over Thanksgiving break this year, I recently like built just a dome in my backyard, like no particular reason. I just wanted to kind of learn about the mathematics behind dome design, try and get hands-on, do something I hadn't done before, and just create a new experience for myself. I think with everything I do, I just try to optimize for like fun experiences and getting the most out of the human experience, most of all.
Yeah, that is really intriguing, because the fact of the matter is that sometimes we don't have enough time to fully explore our interests. And so how do you make time for things that are fun for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think most of what I do, I would consider like fun. So definitely there's that factor, but obviously a lot of things, everyone needs to have like some like free time, and that's really where you let your like creative abilities simmer. Because if you're just like grinding away all the time, it's really hard to actually have the opportunity to like think, reflect, like take a step back and like have your mind on its own generate new ideas, and kind of like leveraging that resting space. In general, I like to focus more on global efficiencies rather than like local optimalities. For example, I know a lot of people our age use a bunch of like productivity hacks, right? Like, I don't know, Pomodoro, which is, I believe in these things as well. Or like, I don't know what some other productivity hacks are. I'm sure you can think of some as well. But yeah, a lot of small things we do to try and like squeeze the most out of each minute. And honestly, I don't think that's worth it. I think if you're going to look at the global changes, like what are you interested in and why are you doing every single activity? And I'm sure there's some activities that you're kind of like iffy about, you're not sure. Like when you ask yourself, you're going to kind of find that you don't actually have the answer for why you're still doing it. Like it could be like an extracurricular that you're not completely, it doesn't align with the interest, but you know is like still like you think is still beneficial for your future. Honestly, I just say cut off as much as you can and focus on the things that really do like give you high energy, like add to your energy rather than drain it. And you're able to learn while having fun. And so I've actually stopped doing a lot of things that I used to do because I want to focus on the things I enjoy more. I think I have more potential in, and that'll leave me more time for, in general, like things that I believe are more impactful. But yeah, so to sum that kind of mainly global changes, focus on cutting down big things, like asking why and getting to the root, and then do that versus trying to optimize like for the minute by minute gains.
Yeah, I guess one thing that really resonated with me, like what you specifically said, was the fact that we're all just not wasting time, but we spend too much time just grinding away, right? And so that takes a bit of time or more energy than really needed. So let's talk about your own podcast, which is like where you also interview young entrepreneurs, give them a voice. And so why'd you start that? Like, where's the inspiration from? Like, how'd you get the inspiration? What have you learned? Where do you plan to take it in the future?
So to give a bit of background, I'm the host of Delta X podcast. And so like Ian mentioned, I host a lot of cool, like basically I find the coolest people I can on the internet, mainly teens, who are, doing something very special, and I think is worth sharing. And I basically have a chat with them. I try to figure out their story and how they're able to do that. And what I like most about podcasts is, I'm sure you realize this too, and I think it's great that we're currently talking on a podcast right now, is that it's really cool to see what people are thinking like in the moment, right? Like their raw thoughts, like you get an idea of the lens that they use to see the world, or like their philosophies, mental models, decision-making frameworks, like all this split-second subconscious things that they've developed over time that most people aren't even consciously aware of. Like we're not really aware of the biases and the own habits we formed in our minds until we kind of look at other people. But yeah, so I started that actually. I think this goes along with a lot of different, like another theme of like engineering luck or like engineering opportunity, because I actually didn't know I was going to start a podcast. I was really involved in the cybersecurity community, and I was invited to be a guest as kind of like a younger voice on a lot of cybersecurity podcasts. And just being a part of that opened up a lot of doors for me, because then the podcast hosts, when they thought of someone who's young, who loves podcasts and who's into cybersecurity, I was one of the people that they had in mind. And so they asked if I wanted to start a podcast, and that's how it all got started. So yeah, I think for anyone listening to this, I'd say if you want to get more opportunities, there's multiple ways to do this, but one of them is just to be in a lot of spaces, right? Just be around people who have that type of connection, have that type of leverage, and just knowing a lot of people who are doing diverse things will automatically get you through a lot of doors. Another way is to just attract like luck. If you've seen like Naval's Twitter thread, he talks about this a lot, but it's the idea of once you get really good at something, then people will kind of think of you or like default to you when they have an opportunity, or when they have someone they want to like loop into a new idea. I think the main why for this, and like why I think podcasting and what you're doing right now, Ian, is so impactful, is because there's a lot of like change that comes from like storytelling, and when you hear other people's stories, it's like it really makes you question like the broader picture of and like help you optimize for what you're doing with your own. So yeah,
Ellen, definitely a lot to unpack there, right? Like you said, or like my thing is like people are more than just what they put on their LinkedIns or like their LinkedIn resume, right? And so just like you said, just seeing what perspective they see the world, how do they see their current career, how do they see just whatever's happening around them, that's really important, and that's what comes through storytelling, like you said. So
yeah, I agree. It's kind of similar to, honestly, like reading. I see you have
for sure.
Actually, I guess it's not really a bookshelf, but you have like kind of cafe in your background. It kind of reminds me of that idea. It's like training on other people's lives, like you get to hear their learnings, like their years of experience and living just distilled into like their most important values, and they're giving this to you. So it's like kind of like reading their book, but in audio form, if that makes sense. Yeah,
I remember my English teacher, we were talking, and he said something about Julius Caesar, right? Like how one person, he doesn't get all the perspectives, and then he ends up killing himself, right? But then, so he said the point of having, or the point, or how you can create your perspective on a situation is if you hear multiple perspectives. And I guess podcast is a key to that in a way.
That's definitely very true. Yeah.
So I was looking on your site, and you've monetized your podcast. So how, like, just explain to us, like explain to the listeners, like, how were you able to monetize it? Through sponsorships, through like getting your voice heard. So hey, entrepreneurs or whoever has an interesting story contacts you, and you create sort of a business out of that. So how does that work for you?
So to clarify, they're not monetary sponsors. I just cover a lot of different events. Is that what you're talking about? Like DEF CON, RSA?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I saw.
Okay, got it. Yeah. So, I don't like exactly monetize, but I do cover like events, like cybersecurity events a lot. So I can talk a bit about that. This comes along with the like opportunities I was kind of referring to earlier. And when you kind of get in front of a lot of people, when you talk with a lot of people, and I think podcasting naturally lends itself to that kind of in-person, like human connection aspect, just because you really get to know someone through their story. It leads to like a lot more like broader opportunities. And so particularly, I've been really lucky to be able to cover some large conferences, like the largest cybersecurity conferences. And while I haven't been able to go in person yet, although hopefully this year, it's just been interesting to see people like present their like the biggest work that they've probably worked on at these like kind of hacker conferences. Like they're very cool people who are presenting things that they've worked on, and they're very like innovative ideas. And I get to go talk with them and kind of like share their journey leading up to that point. So it's kind of like giving context into the more human side of like more scientific or technical work. Like I remember one of my podcasts, I was talking with like a doctor of like psychology and cybersecurity, and he was working on some pretty cool things like GPT-3. And it was just really cool to see how many other interests and he had. And we had some like very deep discussions on transhumanism, like anarcho-primitivism, and overall like how these really successful people have just very unique ideas and very interesting experiences that are just like coalescing onto this like single conference.
Yeah, for sure. I like what really intrigued me is that like you enjoy learning about like cybersecurity, and it kind of reminded me of what you said earlier, right? That just involve yourself in multiple groups, so you can take advantage of all the opportunities, right? And in the end, I think Malcolm Gladwell said like the opportunities compound, right? They become bigger, better, they become more in volume, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess it's just like a part of that cycle.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great quote. I haven't heard one by Gladwell, but I did, like Albert Einstein also said, like compounding is the seventh wonder of the world, or something like that, something along those lines. But yeah, once you get those initial sparks, like it just leads you to like a lot of different opportunities.
Yeah, I think like Malcolm Gladwell, I forgot the book, but a whole chapter is dedicated. He calls it the Matthew effect. So it's just like people who have opportunities in the beginning have many more than the people who don't, right? Makes sense intuitively also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I want to like transition into your research with AI. And I want to congratulate you first for the RSI, the RSI organization you got into.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just tell us more about that. What's your experience? What research did you present, what research did you present to them to get in, and just like what's intrigued you and kept you going in that field, in that research direction?
I love that question, first of all, just like what excites you. A lot of times, like the most important thing I think to ask is like, what excites you so much that you can't sleep at night? And I think a lot of my research and a lot of my current experience has just been trying to pursue those specific ideas that keep me up at night. I'm just so excited about, like genuinely curious about like what this might lead me to. My research, I've been working on this for a few years, my research was focused around a deep learning diagnosis tool for Kawasaki disease. And so, like many of the other things I've been involved in, I didn't know it would come up into research. I mainly just stumbled into it and was trying to like do something like real and meaningful. So my younger sister like had this disease when she was younger. I never really took too much thought into it because it was so like rare and I never heard of it. But then I slowly got like more background onto like as I learned more about like autoimmunity, diseases, health in general. I learned that this was actually a much bigger problem. And pretty much in short, I wanted to ask myself if there's a way to improve diagnoses based on what an algorithm or computers can already learn to do. And so that was where my research led me. And I'm really excited to now be spending summer at MIT on campus, hopefully, and just learning more and answering hard questions. I actually believe that was the main reason. I don't want to speculate too much because, of course, I'm not part of the decision committee. I have no idea what actually got me in. It could be many factors, but I think the main thing that they were really looking for is people who are asking and trying to solve very hard questions, and just knowing what types of questions to ask. For background, the very first question they ask you is if you wanted to solve any question in fields that you're interested in, what would these questions be? That was very interesting, and I actually genuinely loved and answering those, trying to pose that question to me and coming up with those questions and getting to solve them over the summer.
Yeah, for sure. I guess for you, you had a personal motive behind your research, right? And that really drove you. It was because of your sister. But I also remember in another presentation, something about some harassment presentation that my school gave. They said that you don't need it to happen to you to pursue it, right? Or it was specifically for sexual harassment, right? The presenter's sister had been harassed, right? And that's why he decided to go into the field. But the thing is that you don't need a problem to happen close to you to pursue your passion, right? And for you, you built you kind of developed your passion through that. But yeah, really interesting. Just how these passions really come to be, right? It's not one day okay, I'm just gonna study this, I'm gonna study that, right? So with your research, I'm not sure if you may have thought of it like this, but really anything can be monetized. So have you thought of any entrepreneurial venture ideas that you'd like to implement based on your current research or something you plan to do in the future?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I've actually given a bit of thought into the intersection of research and entrepreneurship. I remember there's one time I was talking with one of my friends, and they mentioned how they kind of viewed research and entrepreneurship as opposites. Entrepreneurship's a lot about making those kind of at least how it's viewed is making launching startups, really iterating, testing, kind of fast paced. And they were well, research seems to be completely the opposite, right? Because it seems to be methodical, kind of longer term development, and less about it's more about coming up with a novel idea versus its actual implementation. And so yeah, I've thought a lot about this, and I think what I came to is I disagree with this concept. I think they're a lot more similar than most people think, and you need so startups and entrepreneurship, I think we can all agree, are founded on secrets, right? So it's either a human secret that you're realizing. It's the way people are inclined to act, to behave. It's a new idea or a secret based on how society works. Or there's the scientific secrets, right? The secrets of the universe. How does, why does the ball fall and stuff like that, right? All these questions about science, these are scientific secrets. And so you have human secrets on one side, and which is most closely correlated with entrepreneurship. Then you have scientific secrets. And so my belief is that the best types of companies are founded on both of these. You need to have a scientific innovation, but you also have to know how to best get that scientific innovation into the market. I know there's a lot of business models that don't depend on this, but in my opinion, the most impactful companies like Apple, they had technological innovations, and they also knew how to create the most appealing designs to customers, right? So, I think. And for my personal research, I've given a lot of thought into this as well. And so one of the reasons why I've been working on this for so long, when I know a lot of people probably would have moved on by then, is because I really want to make this a reality, right? A lot of times research stops when something new is discovered. But that's just the beginning, right? There's a whole new path beyond that, which is how do you actually get your research to make the most amount of positive good and directly help people? And so my goal is to get this in hospitals. My goal is to get this in the hands of patients, people who need it, people whose my algorithm can hopefully help save the lives for. And someday it's there's another problem which comes up, and I want to pursue that as well. I would definitely want to also take it to the point where I'm also like being able to actually, like you mentioned, commercialize it.
That's a really strong motive. Like, but it definitely is, right? Because research comes and goes, and it really depends on if you're willing to actively pursue it. And I guess it all, like you said in the beginning, it all depends on that internal motivation that you have, to keep you going forward, right? And so it's really interesting to know like how you think of your research, because you're really invested in this clearly. And so it's just like getting to know why that was really interesting. So would you like to talk about anything else, anything that's really kept you going? What do you have planned after? What do you have planned after high school or college? Like, what do you really want to do? You discussed you want to make an impact through your research, but is there anything else that you've been exploring?
Yeah. So to be completely honest, I am very open about like my future. I think a lot of times we don't expect to, at least from the people I've talked to, who are older, who have gone through this, they say that it's like very hard to like expect exactly what your life's going to look like, but it's very easy to tell, to try to like find your ideal, like kind of like the ideal things you want to do and then work backwards from there. So basically, I don't know which college I'm going to go to. I don't know what exactly I'll be studying, but I do know the types of things that I want to do. And so working backwards from there, I've been trying to like start on those as early as possible, because really like why wait, right? If I know what I want to do in the future, there's no reason why I would be like hustling on things which might give me short-term gains, but it's not going to bring me happiness in the long term. And so if I were to give like a brief summary of like some things I like to work on in the future, like the types of work I like to do, a lot of it is involved with both startups and like science/tech. So like my ideal kind of like future would be working in an AGI lab or like a scientific lab, and then launching solutions at a very rapid pace. So kind of combining that kind of scientific element with the business and the entrepreneurship element.
Yeah, that's really interesting to know, right? Because you were talking about how you could potentially commercialize your research once it becomes more concrete, and you develop it further, right? And it brings me back to the thought that entrepreneurship is not all about like, okay, CEO of or co-founder and CEO of this new tech startup, or that's usually what people think when people think about entrepreneurship, right? But it's maybe working at a startup, right? Or having some sort of impact through that perspective. That also fits into that entrepreneurship sort of definition, I guess. And so before we conclude our interview, I have one quick question, just like off the top of your head. Who's your role model, and how have they helped you pursue whatever you're doing?
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me giving 3, because I actually have.
No, go ahead.
Okay, because I actually have. This is like one of the things that I think has helped me a lot, which is interesting that you talk about it, because the way one of the ways I try to make really big decisions or decide whether I want to take a risk is I ask, like, would my 3 role models do this? Like, if they were alive today, or like if they were an actual human, because one of them is not actually a real person. I'll talk about that in just 1 second. Like, would they want to do what I'm about to do? And if it's no, then I'll kind of think about it and probably not do it. But if it's yes, then like it'll influence my decision a lot, because these are like, who are the people that you admire and how, like what made them into the types of people that you really love. So yeah, my first one is Leonardo da Vinci. Second one is Alan Turing, and third one is Paul Atreides. If you've read Dune, he's like the main character in Dune. All right, yeah. So I'll just like give one sentence for each of them for why. Leonardo da Vinci, childhood role model, curiosity, science, asks a lot of, people would say childish questions, like why is the sky blue? But he really revolutionized a lot of these fields because he thought from first principles, because he asked these kind of like silly, childish questions. And he had a lot of fun. And his art was amazing. So a lot of things about him. Two, Alan Turing, solving puzzles. You know, he's very famous for his AI work, also cracking Enigma. Just the intensity of his work. He also like was the type of person who was very mentally like out there. Like he would run like marathons without even training, which is crazy because I think he was just like very mentally strong. Third, Paul Atreides. This is more like the human side. Like Paul was just, if you read Dune, he's very psychologically like people smart, like street smart. And he thinks a lot about like kind of like effective altruism ideas. Like how can he, as one person, try to optimize the future to make the world like a better place. So that one is kind of that more like human aspect of things. So yeah.
Thank you. It was wonderful getting to know, because I guess in a way, I guess you can also agree with me that our role models play a pretty big influence into how we pursue our own dreams, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I completely agree.
Yeah. So as we conclude our wonderful conversation, what advice would you have? What advice do you have for teens thinking about entering research? Doesn't matter how old they are, just like maybe who have an idea that they want to discover. Like, what's your advice for them?
That's a good one. The biggest one I'd say is just become a hub for interesting ideas. The hardest part is actually coming up with a huge idea, or an idea which has a lot of potential and is increasingly relevant. Like, of course, the actual doing after the idea is the most important part, but the idea is often the hardest part, and the part that people spend the most time on. Like that tends to be the biggest bottleneck for most people our age, especially. So yeah, I'd say just like become a hub for ideas. Like when you look at something, try to be able to like ask questions just like that, like naturally. It's kind of a habit you develop, or being able to think about things differently. So like, I think Leonardo da Vinci is a great example of this. He could look at a woodpecker and say, I wonder what his tongue looks like. Like that's literally one of the questions he asked. And getting past that like idea that we know a lot. Like I think it's interesting that like 90% of childhood questions we still don't know the answer to. Like I'm pretty sure most people, when they ask why the sky is blue, they would not know the answers, like Rayleigh scattering, that like wavelengths, and they would not be able to explain it to a child. So just going back to those questions, asking those types of questions, getting those types of new ideas, that is where the real research heart comes from. So yeah, that's my biggest tip. But honestly, like I have a ton more for that. So if you ever have any questions, if any of the listeners wants to get into research, my DMs, I guess, are always open. So I am happy to give more advice.
Definitely. Thank you. And it reminded me of something from Rick and Morty. I don't watch the show. I just saw it in like a GIF. It's like, think for yourselves, don't be sheep, right? And it's all about not conforming and just being able to have that inquisitive, like just like almost natural curiosity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think curiosity is one of the things that you can actually train. Counterintuitively, you can train yourself to be more curious and kind of get that childhood wonder back from when we were all younger and curious about everything.
Yeah, I think there's like this anecdote. I forgot which was. I think it was Newton or Einstein who used to play with the kids, and he was talking about like how if you stay as stiff as a bow, right, you're gonna break. But if you loosen up, right, it's much easier to shoot that arrow. Funny little thing. So, do you have any last words for our listeners? Just something that, it can be anything, like something that's really pushed you to new highs, something that really keeps you up in the night, something that gets you up in the morning, just like anything that you really want our listeners to take away.
Very literally, the last thing I do before I go to sleep is I read. And I know a lot of people, as they grow older, they stop reading. But if you think about it, like if you stop exercising, you will grow weaker. And that's just how activation muscles work. If you don't keep training your brain, it's the same way. Like if you don't keep on getting new information, you quickly become outdated. It's like not getting software updates, for your brain. Not to sound too robotic. Anyways, but yeah, I just say keep reading interesting things. Read classics, read, Einstein's General Theory of Relativity. Read it, whatever you're interested in. It doesn't have to be anything too intellectual. But yeah, that's one thing. And also keep like paper and pencil by your nightstand too. A lot of times you'll come up with cool ideas right before you sleep, just laying there. And like when you think about the things that excite you, automatically your brain will start to generate new ideas. And sometimes even during dreams, like it's kind of cool too, how you can come up with new things and solve math in your dreams too. It's actually, there's studies on this if you want to look into it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that quick bit of, I guess, advice, just like being able to read just anything, what you love. It shouldn't be like a, what do you call it, cat in the hat if you're in like 12th grade, but something that...
I'm sure you'll learn something.
Yeah, who knows?
Just reading in general.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you, Alan, for coming on the podcast, talking about your experience. Congratulations on the RSI. What else? I hope your podcast, I hope you also do wonders with your podcast too. Keep on learning. And again, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you for making time for us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me on. I think it's cool that another high schooler has a podcast, and I'm definitely like you're sharing a lot of very valuable information on here with Entrepreneurship Insights. So it was really great to be on, and I hope people can find some value in this as well.
Yeah. Thank you. And with that, have a wonderful evening, you all.